Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here, for being at the session, for being at Inbound, for being here in the spiritual and physical sense of the word. I really appreciate it. This is my third Inbound, my second as a speaker. The first Inbound I was involved in, I was a DJ in Club Inbound, but was asked not to come back. This is a rough guide to what we'll be talking about today in the session. It may change as we go, depending on how things progress and the timing of it all. Today, I want to make a connection, and I want it to be a strong connection between you and me, the speaker, and the audience. And while I don't know you, or particularly care to know you, I want you to know me, who I am. What is my background? And I want the connection to be strong, like the connection between two continents, the transatlantic cable, for example, or a super, super strong Wi-Fi signal, or the bond between a gnarled old sea captain and his boat, that sort of level of connection. And so we have to ask ourselves, who is Orlando Scampington? And for the one or two of you in the audience, two probably at the most, who don't know me, my name is Orlando Scampington. This is my Twitter handle. If you follow me on Twitter, I will have one of my interns review your Twitter and see if you're worth following. I'm not making any guarantees. And who am I? What do I do? I would describe myself, first and foremost, as a serial entrepreneur, as a compulsive founder. These are just some of the venerable tech companies that I founded in the last few years. These are my babies. I brought them into the world. I watched them grow up and I sold them, as one does with babies. And if I had to pick one or two, which is very hard to do with children, to pick your favorites, I would probably say that Bloxflop is at the top of the list of these companies. If you work in the childhood pharmaceutical industry or rural waste management, you use Bloxflop. It is the industry standard for both. So I'm guessing that most of you are in those fields are familiar with Bloxflop. The second one that I'm especially proud of is Plotbox, which really changed the way that small and medium businesses handle international finance, payroll, and small data. I mean, not big data. Big data was kind of outside of our wheelhouse, and we focus on small data, as one does. But I'm not just a doer. I'm not just a builder. I'm a thinker, and I'm a writer. And my last publication was a co-writing venture that I did with Gary Vaynerchuk. And this project really stemmed from a very personal situation. My son, Orlando Jr., was 9 months old, and his personal brand was effectively non-existent. So I was talking to Gary V. I call him Gary V. We're very close friends. I said, Gary V., I'm worried about Orlando Jr., and I think there are other children who are dealing with this issue. What can we do? And so we wrote this book. And Gary V. was a fantastic co-author, but beyond that, he was a fantastic friend to me and my family. My son, Orlando Jr., was a mess. He was sleeping 12 hours a night on average, and he would get up, and he would take 2 or 3 naps during the day, just lounging around. He wasn't dressing himself. He wasn't feeding himself. He wasn't hustling 150%. He wasn't crushing every chance. He wasn't thinking big picture 10x growth. But Gary talked to him, and Gary got through to him, and I will be forever grateful for the time that they spent. People are the DNA of your culture. The DNA of your culture. And what they bring to your company is very personal. They all have their own story. And I want to tell you, by example, my story, what makes up the being known as Orlando Scampington. And I want to talk to you about my great-grandparents. Not my parents, they're dead to me. But my great-grandparents came from Kalamaristan, which is now a province in the southern portion of Lithuania, but back in the day was a very well-known country. What was it well known for? Public transportation. They were ahead of the curve, very innovative. They're also well known for their ostrich fighting league, the best in Europe, and tragically, perhaps best well known for having the highest potato-related homicide rate of any country. This is where my great-grandparents came from. My great-grandfather, Berbatov, was a blacksmith. He's an extremely talented builder. They named the Blacksmithing Academy after him. He was just an incredibly smart man, and I think a lot of who I am comes from him. And he built the usual fare, the stuff that you build as a blacksmith. Horseshoes, gardening tools, weapons, chastity belts for farm animals, all the standard pieces of metalwork. And so when my great-grandmother Eustace died at an ostrich fight, ironically killed by an ostrich named Potato, Berbatov did what so many others did at the time, and he decided to make a new life for himself in this country called America. And so he came to the US, excited to start fresh, but he discovered that there was not the demand for blacksmithing that there was at home. And so he had to find a new path. What did he do? Berbatov was innovative. He was a thinker. He was somebody who didn't see things the way that other people saw things. He thought outside the box. And I mean this very literally. He was living in a shipping container with 3 other families. They were all very loud talkers, all heavy smokers. So his only time for actual thinking was when he was walking around. And in his walking around, he started to consider, what problems can I solve for my community, for the people around me? And in his walking around, in his thinking, he ended up developing the world's first steam-powered cat thresher. Now, before the cat thresher, it would take 6 Portuguese men or 12 Irishmen a full week to harvest and process a crop, which is a lot of time. And the end result was often subpar. Only 3 to 4 bushels, inconsistent quality, the usual fare. But with the cat thresher, a single farmer could harvest an entire crop in a day by themselves. So he really, through his invention, really bridged the agricultural industrial world. But he didn't just stop there. He also invented a number of other products and founded a number of other companies. And I think I have to credit my great-grandfather Berbatov for giving me my drive, my innovative spirit, my gluten allergies, and I have also very weak ankles. But these are all things that I got from him. This is my personal DNA. That was my story. But we need to broaden our scope to sort of figure out where company culture has its roots. So we journey into the past. Why do we journey into the past? The past is important. It's the road behind us. It's the prequel to the present. It's the betting odds for the future. It's important. And so let's look at where company culture got its start. There are some scientists who believe that animals existed before humans, that they were around before humans existed. Controversial theory, difficult to prove, but let's go with it for argument's sake. So if this is the case, animals formed the first groups, the first companies, and therefore had the first company cultures. And when you think about the language that we use to describe animals, there's a business tinge to it. You have alpha males, you have worker bees and worker ants. You have middle management sharks and data entry kangaroos, all these terms that you hear but don't really think about in the business context, but it's clearly there. But humans are not animals. We are different species, obviously. And so let's look at human culture. How did it form? Why is it important? Human groups and human culture started with one goal in mind, and that was survival. We formed groups and cultures to survive. Alone, none of these men could survive an attack from an apex predator. But together, as a group with a unified culture, they could survive even the harshest of conditions, even being attacked by a North American tufted farting bear, maybe one of the most dangerous animals on the planet. Once we had survival under our belt, we started to focus on improving ourselves. How do we improve each other? This is the first quarterly review, and according to preeminent anthropologists, the character on the left was fired, and then later violated his non-compete clause and died in a tar pit. So it's a bit of a cautionary tale. As society grew, so did our culture. The Greeks invented a little gimmick, a cultural gimmick, called democracy. And it let large disconnected populations try to find a common voice. And having a shared voice as a culture is supremely important. A shared voice lets you shape laws, lets you steer policy, and it lets you vote on The Voice, America's Got Talents. I'm shocked still that Squawky J lost in the semifinals. I'm still trying to come to terms with that. But this does raise an issue with democracy. Sometimes the voice of the people is not always the best. What do we get from organized religion? Well, I think we get leadership, we get conflict resolution, we get delegation of power, and you can really pick, I think, any organized religion to focus on and find these elements, but I chose Christianity because I think there's a wonderful passage from in 8th Corinthians that explains how to delegate, how to resolve issues. I'm just going to read it, I don't have it memorized. And the disciples were now full, so Jesus said, "Thus this meal has ended," and summoned the Olive Garden waitress who said, "O Lord, shall that be all? Desserts, anyone?" And Jesus said, "No, just the check, and please split it 3 ways." Sorry, 12 ways, I misspoke. But there was much grumbling from Peter, and he said, "Jesus, did I not get but a salad? Why should I pay an equal share to Paul or Matthew, who ate bountiful meals?" And Jesus said, "Yes, a salad is but a salad. But did you not order 3 mojitos? Well, the rest of us had but 1. And Peter saw that it was true and good and paid his share. And Judas muttered, "We really should be splitting this 13 ways," but nobody paid him any mind. And they left a generous tip for Samantha, who had been a good and prompt server. From the military, we get structure and discipline. Very important to your culture. This is a British naval unit from mid-century based on the uniforms. That's my guess. So the past, in conclusion, is important. As the old saying goes, those who do not learn from the past are doomed to have great success, I believe is the full. Let's talk about the present. Before you build your own culture, it's worth considering what's out there and existing in other company cultures. Let's look at some examples. You can pick and choose what you like, what you dislike, what you want to try to avoid. There are a lot of options. Let's start with an obvious one. Google has a real culture of success. They're well known for trademarking primary colors, very bold move, and for widely used products that you see every day. Google Glass, Google Wave, and Google Plus, which is the most popular Google-based social network on the internet. Another great example, Zappos. They revolutionized how people buy footwear. If you buy the wrong size of shoe, send it back. Free shipping both ways. Really fantastic. Free shipping is important, but the real sort of amazing thing about Zappos is that they have a flat structure. There are no managers, no directors, totally flat. Employees get free shoes. The cafeteria serves shoes instead of food. More than half the company's advisory board is made up of shoes. They appointed a Nike cleat to be the head of HR. Just amazing culture. Most of you know Elon Musk for his work at Tesla, but SpaceX, another one of his companies, very futuristic, forward-looking company. For as long as we've been around as humans, we've gotten rid of people in a Terran, earthly manner. But SpaceX looks to the stars, looks to Mars, and says, why can't we throw away people in space? Very future forward-looking. 2 local examples I want to sort of talk about. HubSpot, very culture-focused, focused on transparency. They have a mantra of get shit done, very just nose to the grindstone, make things happen. But if they're known for anything, it is for their culture code. And if companies don't copy it outright, they certainly draw from it heavily. It's an inspiring collection of ideas and concepts that help steer culture. Finally, I want to delve into the world of sports ball and the New England Football Patriots. Amazing team. The Patriot Way is really sort of the pinnacle of company cultural ideas. It's led to amazing success for this team. But it's a secretive organization. We're not sure what the Patriot Way actually entails, but we can make some educated guesses. So let's talk about the basics. Do your job. Execution is the foundation of success. Pretty basic concept here. The team is more important than the individual. That's applicable to any company, any organization. No one is more important than the team. Not even an MVP, multiple Super Bowl winning quarterback, laser vision, cannon for an arm, body of a Greek god, flawless. Consistency is also important. Same seats on the flight home. That makes total sense to me. Flexibility as far as where your music and culture intersect. It's good to let everybody feel like they're involved. This last point may be the main pillar of the Patriots team. You have to keep small objects away from Gronk. He will eat anything. We're talking paper clips, golf balls, gloves, iPhones. You laugh, but at the end of this photo shoot, he ate this kitten. He said he thought it was a baguette, which was ironic because he doesn't know what a baguette is. He said it's like a type of food of some kind. We need to talk about the language we use to talk about company culture. Because we use a very mechanical language. You build a company culture. There's like a machine element to it. This piece goes here, this piece goes here. Let's put this on top. Let's move this piece over here. You are building. It is not an organic process. And the most obvious machine to use as a template for company culture, it being a machine, is the cat thresher. You may recognize this model. I think there are parallels to be drawn between each part of the cat thresher and a company culture. Let's start at the top or the front. Let's talk about leadership. Leaders and donkeys, surprisingly similar when you really drill into this comparison. The leader is responsible for pulling, for the direction, but it's totally reliant on the whole to succeed. Can't do it alone. Leaders and donkeys are both motivated by reward and deterred by getting whipped with some sort of hickory switch of some kind. Who can forget Microsoft's Steve Ballmer getting soundly swatted by Bill Gates after the shaky rollout of Windows 2000? Once you saw it, you could not unsee it. Leaders, donkeys, are both prone to biting children when they're excited, when they're scared. Who can forget Microsoft's Steve Ballmer biting off a toddler's pinky at Microsoft's annual Ignite conference? It was controversial, to say the least. The ingredients. Quality cats lead to quality threshing. Good employees lead to good culture. Ingredients are important. If you use low-quality cats, your thresh bundles will be undersized. They will burn too fast. They'll be more prone to June bug infestations. They'll be like 50% less minty on average. You need good quality cats. In the same way, you need good quality people to have a quality culture. But how do you ensure that? Well, I think there are 4 sort of fail-proof questions for screening out candidates. So, first question, kind of a softball. What are your thoughts on your company culture? Do they have any idea? Have they done their homework? Start off very easy. Second question, a little more in-depth. What are some good answers to this? Oh yeah, or sounds great, or more snacks. These are all good 2-word answers. Third question requires a higher level of understanding, some subtlety. What are good responses to this? I would say Captain America, Wonder Woman, Cyclops, all very stable, very positive superheroes, and superheroes that you'd want to be associated with your company culture? What are some bad answers? Wolverine, he's a loner, unpredictable. Green Goblin, evil. You don't want that involved in your company culture. Doctor Strange, the unlicensed podiatrist. No good. Very different Doctor Strange than the one that's on the screens in the big theaters now. Different character. And finally, a trick question at the end. If your candidate thinks that company culture is a joke, it's not, or that robbing orphans or doing drugs is a great idea, you may want to schedule a follow-up interview to follow up with them, see what they really mean. Now, everybody knows that if you don't get the right mix of oxygen and barley and raw bath salts and gristle, your final product will be terrible. In the same way, you need the right mix of people in your company culture to make things happen. And diversity has been a real issue for the tech sector, but it's worth addressing. And I want to talk about a group that has truly, truly struggled to gain a foothold in the tech sector. And that's, of course, white men. This is a group who every day tries to get tech jobs and really, really struggles. And the numbers are just astounding. This is a real study. It's tragic. And for those who do make it into a tech company, the road up or the ladder up, really, really depressing numbers. Look at how things go the further you get up in a tech company. Please, no matter what your company is, no matter what your culture is, look out for white men. They're having a hell of a time. Your office environment, very much the churn vault of the cat thresher. It's the big space where it all happens. And some of you may be intimidated by the idea of having to have an amazing office right off the bat, but you shouldn't be. You can build it out in sections. So start off with the basics, chairs, desks, meeting rooms. On average, employees tend to be hungry at least once a day, so perhaps a kitchen or two. But as you grow, as you feel more comfortable, move on to the bigger things. You need to look out for millennials. They will wander away. They will put things in their mouth, not to be trusted. And studies have shown that having a dedicated space for jazz music, very important. Just learning to riff, learning to collaborate and improv, the basics. And finally, when you reach a stage where you feel comfortable, where you really want to treat yourself, treat yourself. Treat your employees, treat your culture. These are all amazing things if you haven't experienced them. Finally, things are going to change. As your company grows, it'll go through growing pains, and your culture will change. That's kind of a given. It's kind of like the steam release chamber of the cat thresher. What causes change? What factors are there? Well, your office space, it can change. Maybe it grows, maybe you have a second location. That changes how people work and how your culture functions. What else? Your team structure, how projects get done, the up and down, the moving of things. Management. Also, if you have management... All right, my intern loaded the wrong icon set. Please ignore the icons. Management changes can affect culture. Financial changes also major effect on culture. If you're doing well, your company culture will feel different than when you're struggling financially. Okay. As you pivot, as you pivot in your product, what you're building, who you're targeting, who you're marketing to changes, your culture will change. That's natural. And finally, the tools and technology you use in your company can affect your culture. And this is, I think, worth kind of double-clicking on, in that there may be subtle differences between the tools you use, but they can have profound effect on how your culture functions. So the difference between using, say, a growth stack versus a sales thrust versus a marketing rod may seem very small, but there are major differences between these things, and it will affect your company culture. Okay, finally, your company theme song, which is, of course, the whistle box of the cat thresher. It's good to have a song to sing at big moments in your company's lifespan, at hirings, at firings, IPO parties, SEC investigations, something to pull people together. There are some fantastic examples out there. And what makes for a good company theme song? I would argue that it is lyrics that are memorable, melodies that people can remember and sing. These are some very good examples. Some less than great examples to avoid. Let's go down the list. Inappropriate lyrics affects your bottom line. I can't even say most of the words in this third one. Negative take on peer reviews, which I'm a big fan of. And then just a terrible song by a terrible band. I would suggest avoiding it. Culture is what holds us all together. Whether we are animals or humans, big companies, small companies, it is the glue that binds us. Culture is the rotting muscle that connects the bones in this terrifying Frankenstein you call a company. But culture is hard. Having a company culture, building one is hard. It requires patience, collaboration, attention to detail, self-reflection, honest self-reflection that is, flexibility, diligence, and attention to detail. And having built and run a matrix, I've run this program over several million times to determine the value of having a company culture. Should you have one? And I can say without hesitation that you probably should consider having one if you're not busy. I don't want to pressure anyone, but it's just worth considering. Thank you for being here in this room at Inbound and for being here on this planet. Good night.